Hello and welcome to the Penalty Box Perspective podcast. Matt with you today, Nathaniel taking a much deserved break on holiday in Austria with the wife, so you're stuck with me today. It's going to be a solo pod. You guys are going to have to bear with me as I will just be talking to myself for the majority of this show. So what we've got today, the trade deadline has passed in the NHL. A lot of moves. We're going to break them down. We're going to see who's gone where, who were the winners, who were the losers, what trades happened, which trades didn't happen. I'm going to try my best to break down as many of the trades from the trade deadline, as well as maybe the day or two before, just to try and give you my thoughts and feelings on them, see who came out on top, see who maybe could have got some more. We're going to start with one of the big trades that happened. It came in just after the deadline. Nazem Kadri is a Colorado Avalanche. He heads back to Colorado along with a fourth-round pick in exchange for Victor Olofsson, the unsigned rookie Max Curran, as well as a conditional first and conditional second-round pick. Now, Calgary are going to retain 20% of Nazem Kadri's $7 million salary, so that's $1.4 million being retained by Calgary. The conditions of that pick, I'm not too sure as of yet. I don't know if they've been reported elsewhere, but I'm going off of the dailyfaceoff.com, the trade deadline tracker, was massively helpful for me. I was refreshing it senseless over the course of the day. But yeah, Kadri ends up back in Colorado. Now, this was a move that we thought was going to happen. Kadri certainly looked as though he was going to be traded. It certainly seemed that way for the last few months. He's been having a great season, even on a struggling Calgary side. He returns back to Colorado, a team that he's played on previously. He's performed well in the playoffs for them in the past. And looking at this Colorado team now, as they go towards the playoffs, they're going to have a center depth of Nathan MacKinnon, Brock Nelson, as well as Nazem Kadri now. Is absolutely phenomenal center depth in that team. Calgary, on the flip side, they get a great return. They get that first-round pick, the second-round pick, as well as Victor Olofsson, who I quite like him. He may well be the beneficiary of playing on a really good Colorado team, but he's a very serviceable NHL player for now, as well as the rights to free agent Max Curran as well, who is a center. I can't say I know too much about him myself, but for me, that's a great deal tied up by Calgary. Moving into the next sort of big trade, I'm going to try and cover off the big ones where I can. Justin Falk arrives at the Detroit Red Wings. Steve Yzerman playing his trades. He's a very cautious GM. We know he was involved in the Quinn Hughes trade discussions. Obviously, he wasn't willing to make a trade without any sort of guarantees over an extension. I think personally, I think that's quite smart. Obviously, Minnesota are now the beneficiaries of that trade with them getting Quinn Hughes, but they add a bit of defensive depth in Justin Falk, who arrives to St. Louis, from St. Louis, sorry, in exchange for Dmitry Bukelnikov, Justin Holl, as well as a first and a third round pick. Now, for me, that's a little bit of an a bit of an overpay, but St. Louis set their price, and that was the price that Detroit were going to have to meet in order to get that defensive solidity. A great NHL veteran who does have playoff experience already on his resume. And for Detroit, they're making that push for the playoffs. They need a little something to get them over the hump and get them into the playoffs. Now, I don't think personally that Justin Falk alone makes that deal, makes the playoff push happen on its own. I think that it's really going to require everyone else on that team to step up. You know, the likes of Moritz Seider, Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat. You know, they're all going to have to chip in and play their part in order to get this Detroit team into the postseason. But what they also get out of this Justin Falk deal is a little bit of experience on their back end. They've got a lot of really, really exciting young defensemen. They've got Simon Edvinson. They've got Moritz Seider. They've got Axel Sandin-Pellikka as well, who's had a great season this year as well. And they just get a little bit of experience back there. Someone to kind of show these kids the way and try and kind of push them into into the postseason, galvanize them where they can. And I think it's St. Louis definitely got a great haul for this. And St. Louis, I'm not really sure what they're doing as a team at the moment. They certainly seem set on kind of selling off a few pieces, and I'm going to talk more about St. Louis in a little bit in terms of the guys who weren't moved around the deadline. But Detroit get Falk, St. Louis get picks and players back. Justin Holl obviously can go and kind of drop into that space where Falk was residing previously. Moving into the next trade then, the Seattle Kraken make the trade with Toronto for Bobby McMahon. The left winger arrives in Seattle in exchange for a 2027 second round pick and a 2026 fourth round pick. Now, just speaking to some Toronto fans I know, shout out Tim, how you doing, bud? That second round pick, I think a lot of Toronto fans maybe thought that maybe someone like McMahon would garner a first. For me, I don't think so. I think that this is a fair trade. I think Toronto got what they got market value for McMahon, I think. It was a guy they were looking to maybe move out. They get a couple of good picks back for him. It kind of restocks their draft capital and restocks the cupboards a little on their end. And Bobby McMahon arrives in Seattle to provide them with a little bit more scoring depth sort of down the stretch now. Someone will probably go in that middle six. Seattle have just been a weird team this season, though, man. They don't have that premium offensive scorer, but they're still managing to find a way, to be in there, be competitive, and win games and put themselves in a really strong position to make the playoffs this year, potentially through the wild cards. That remains to be seen, but I think that Seattle have made a good trade here, and I think Toronto have got a fair result back for it. So. Moving into the next one, this was a massive trade, one that was completely unexpected for me. John Carlson leaves the Washington Capitals after, I want to say, 17 years, after certainly a long-ass time. He goes to Anaheim to join the Ducks in exchange for a conditional first-round pick, as well as a 2027 third-round pick. Now, again, according to dailyfaceoff.com, the condition of that is that if Anaheim failed to qualify for the 2026 playoffs, they have the option to retain its 2026 first-round pick and send its 2027 first-round pick to Washington instead. So, if the Ducks fall down at the end of the year, they don't make the playoffs, I don't personally see that happening. They have the option to defer that pick a year. And so the Capitals are ultimately gaining a late first round pick here. Now, John Carlson is a legendary NHL defenseman. He is the highest point scoringest Capitals defenseman in history. For sure a Hall of Famer for me. He's a Stanley Cup winner, a big body, someone who excels in both aspects of the game, a great 200-foot defenseman, physical, maybe coming towards the latter stages of his career, but still plenty to offer. And going into that young Anaheim team, who have a lot of great young defensemen, but maybe defensemen with lacking a little bit of experience, I think that's a great deal for John Carlson to go through to Anaheim and help them, in this final stretch to get into the playoffs and then hopefully win a round or two. But yeah, by all accounts, this trade happened overnight. John Carlson woke up to the news that he'd been traded, so it's always kind of interesting to see how these trades go down. But I like this deal for Anaheim. I think they get a great defenseman, someone who I never thought I would see leave the Capitals, but here we are. I think the Capitals are preparing, for life after Alex Ovechkin, and maybe looking at going into a retool, rebuild, whatever you want to call it, over the next few years. So we'll wait and see what happens there. And I think a great deal getting John Carlson in there to Anaheim. So The next trade I'm going to talk about involves the Buffalo Sabres and the Winnipeg Jets. The Buffalo Sabres very active on this trade deadline day. Jarmo Kekalainen, the GM, clearly wanting to make additions with Buffalo in such a strong place and looking like they're going to break that duck of playoff drought and get themselves into the postseason. We know that there was a deal on the table potentially for Colton Parayko from St. Louis, but he wasn't willing to waive his no trade clause. They made the trade with the Winnipeg Jets for Logan Stanley and Luke Schenn, with Winnipeg obtaining Isaac Rosen, Jacob Bryson, 2027 second round pick, as well as a 2026 conditional fourth round pick. Now, the condition attached to that is Winnipeg will receive the better of Buffalo or Edmonton's 2026 fourth round picks, and Winnipeg will retain 50% of Luke Schenn's $2.75 million contract. So they will retain $1.375 million on that deal. So Buffalo obtaining a couple of veteran defensemen. Logan Stanley, we know, a massively physical defenseman. I want to say he's 6'8", a really, really big guy, someone who can lay the body, plays physical, plays big. Me and Nathaniel talk regularly about there's a difference between being physically big and actually playing big, and Logan Stanley is one of those guys who definitely plays big. Luke Schenn, a guy with an absolute ton of experience in the NHL at this point in his career. Certainly if Buffalo are going to be going into the postseason, they're going to need someone who has a bit of experience in that region, as many talented players as Buffalo have, Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, they're not guys who've played postseason hockey. So I think this is a good deal. Isaac Rosen going the other way was I really like Isaac Rosen. I think he's a really promising young winger in this league. He plays with a lot of speed. He's got a lot of offensive upside, and for Winnipeg to get that back, hopefully they get a little bit of scoring depth. We've seen this season how Winnipeg have basically been a one-line team, and they've really struggled to get the depth scoring through the lineup, and that's been kind of ultimately their pitfall this year, I think. They also get some picks back. They also get Jacob Bryson as well on the back end, so they do get a defenseman back in that deal. But Buffalo, they're loading up. They also added Sam Carrick from the New York Rangers to add a little bit of center depth there for a 2026 third round pick, as well as a 2026 sixth round pick originally belonging to the Chicago Blackhawks. So a mid and a late round pick there for Sam Carrick. I don't have any complaints over this deal. I think that's a fair value. I think that Sam Carrick's someone who'll drop into that bottom six on the Sabres really well, and adds a little bit of centre depth for them down the stretch, which you are going to need in this latter stage of the season, as well as into the postseason, if that does happen to be the case. So moving into the next deal, the Vancouver Canucks trading Connor Garland to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2028 second round pick, so a couple of years down the line there, as well as a 2026 third round pick. Connor Garland goes to Columbus as they make their own playoff push later into the season. I love this deal for Columbus. I really like Connor Garland as a player. He's someone I've wanted Chicago to trade for in the past. I think he is a really good 200-foot player. I think he can score, he can create. He's also a pain in the ass to play against as well. He's an absolute fiend on the ice as well. So they get a little bit of grit scoring in there. But Vancouver selling off Connor Garland, who I believe his new contract doesn't even take effect until next year. I think he signed the extension at over the summer, I want to say, in Vancouver. But they've traded him out before that even comes into play. So Connor Garland's new contract kicking in next year with Columbus. I'm going to have to check this up now. Connor Garland contract. I can't remember what it was for. Maybe $6 million? $6 million on a 6-year deal that starts July 1st. Yeah, so they get him on a 6x6. I think with the way that the salary cap's going in the NHL at the moment, I think for a guy of Connor Garland's quality, who's a good second line winger in this league, would be a great third line winger in this league. I think $6 million for 6 years is a great deal for someone like that. I think I think Columbus have come out and with a really good deal here. So a few deals took place later on the evening of the 5th. In fact, you know what? I'll wrap up the deadline itself. So the Minnesota Wild. God, I wish Nathaniel was here for this. They make 2 deals. I'm going to talk about the first one. I'm going to talk about Bobby Brink. Bobby Brink, the Minnesota native, arrives in Minnesota to the Wild in exchange for David Jiricek. Now, David Jiricek, who I believe was, I want to say, the 6th overall pick in his respective draft class, now finds himself on his 3rd NHL team, I think. Now, I really like David Jiricek. I think he's a fantastic young defenseman. Minnesota, though, they are going all in this season. So they've already traded Zeev Buium. They're arguably their top defensive prospect in the deal to get Quinn Hughes, as well as Liam Ogren and Marco Rossi and a whole ass load of picks. But they now trade to get Bobby Brink, who I really, really like. He is a perfect example of a young forward who already has a few seasons under his belt. I want to say Bobby Brink's 24, maybe 25 years old, can score at the NHL level. I've really liked him in Philadelphia. I think he's going to add some middle six scoring for Minnesota for sure. And it was very clear that Minnesota really wanted to bring Brink to the Wild. And as I said, a Minnesota native, and bringing him back there is a massive deal for the team. Now, the next Minnesota trade is one that hurts a little, but I'm happy for everyone involved. So the Minnesota Wild, they obtain Chicago Blackhawks captain Nick Foligno in exchange for future considerations. So, first and foremost, I am so happy that Nick Foligno gets an opportunity to chase a cup. Obviously, he's never won the Stanley Cup in his long career. To me, this indicates this is probably Nick Foligno's last year before he hangs up the gloves and calls it a day. He wants one more shot at a cup, and where better to go than the Minnesota Wild with his brother, Marcus Foligno, on a team that is going all in for the Stanley Cup. He'll be down there on that 4th line for sure. But I think for Minnesota fans, what they're getting from Nick Foligno, not even necessarily on the ice, but off the ice especially, he has been the captain through the Chicago Blackhawks rebuild. He came in, he didn't have to commit the time that he did to lead this Blackhawks team, a very young Blackhawks team. He wanted to take on that mantle, he wanted to take on that pressure, and he excelled so much. He had a load of the Chicago players over to his house in the summer. They ran like a little mini training camp of their own. Just a super awesome guy. Does so much work for charity. He's a massive family man, and he goes and joins up with his brother, in Minnesota, stays in the Central Division. So I'm going to be definitely keeping one eye on Minnesota through the playoffs. They are going to be my playoff team, who I want to win. Not only because it'll make Nathaniel happy, but I would love to see Nick Foligno lift the cup. I am sad that he's moving on from Chicago, but he has handed over the keys to this young team, presumably Connor Bedard, who I think will probably be Chicago's next captain, either him or Alex Vlasic for me. But Nick Foligno, future considerations. I'm just glad that Kyle Davidson, the Chicago GM, wasn't holding out for, ridiculous picks or anything like that. He's doing Nick Foligno a solid and getting him to a place that he was going to be happy going to. It did seem to kind of all the world that he was going to be reuniting back at Columbus with the Blue Jackets. But for this opportunity to come up for him to go play in Minnesota, I'm so happy for the guy. And yeah, I hope the Folignos bring home the cup, and he finally gets to win one. Couple more trades then from the deadline day itself. Then Tampa Bay reacquiring the ageless Corey Perry from LA in exchange for a 2028 second round pick. I am baffled that we are in the year of our Lord 2026 and Corey Perry at 40 years old is still garnering second round picks, but he's been good on this LA team. He's a guy who very much knows his role. There is a type of player that you need in the playoffs, and you need a guy like Corey Perry. He is an absolute dick to play against. He plays physical, he plays hard, he knows what it takes to win. He's a Stanley Cup champion. He's a Hart Trophy winner. He's a Rocket Richard winner. He's had an illustrious career as Corey Perry. I know he's not to everyone's cup of tea. Obviously, I'm a Chicago fan, and his time in Chicago ended kind of somewhat tumultuously. Um, but Corey Perry ends up back in Tampa, which, having him down there on the fourth line, he's a guy who knows what it takes to win. He's a guy who's had success in his career. He's a guy who John Cooper will know so well at this point, and who he just wants to, have his guys there to try and make a big push, especially considering how banged up they've been this year on the injury front. I think Corey Perry's been nothing short of, will be nothing short of a great addition to that team. LA retaining 50% of his salary, as I mentioned, so making it a really nice, affordable deal for Tampa to be able to get done. I was stunned to see Perry traded. Can't say I really understand too much what the LA Kings are doing at this point. Obviously, they fired their coach. They brought in DJ Smith. Obviously, they've traded for Panarin. They've lost Kevin Fiala. Like, it's all sort of coming apart, all in Kopitar's swan song year as well. So, I think it's all kind of ending in flames over there in LA. But we'll see how it goes for Perry in the postseason with Tampa. I'm kind of super excited in a weird way to see how this all unfolds. The Minnesota Wild, as previously mentioned, they've added Nick Foligno, they've added Bobby Brink, they have sent Vinny Hinostroza to the Florida Panthers in exchange for future considerations. This is just a numbers game. Obviously bringing in two guys, someone had to go. And I think, they've done Vinny Hinostroza a solid, as opposed to looking at sending him down to the AHL. In sending him to a team in Florida who kind of need all the bodies they can get at the moment. I don't know if he'll be staying at Florida long term. I really like Vinny Hinostroza. He's a Chicago native, and I really liked him when he was on the Blackhawks. So good to see him, still maintaining a job in the National Hockey League. Nick Delorier arrives at Carolina for a conditional 2027 seventh round pick. I mean, for me, why the fuck are you even putting conditions on a seventh round pick? Just give him the pick, man. Delorier arrives in Carolina, though. Now, I mentioned before with Corey Perry, there are types of guys who you need in the playoffs, and someone like Nick Delorier is a prime example of that. He's physical, he'll drop the gloves, he'll lay a big hit. He can pop a goal in or two every now and then as well. So, Philly move him out. Carolina takes the salary, as well as giving up a condition of a conditional seventh round pick. I don't even know what those conditions are. Delorier arrives in Carolina. The Pittsburgh Penguins also making an addition in their playoff push. They add certainly a physical player in Elmer Soderblom from the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for a 2026 third round pick, the pick that originally belonged to San Jose. That goes to Detroit. Soderblom goes to Pittsburgh. Now, Soderblom's going to help solidify that bottom six. He is a big man. I want to say 6'8", 6'9", a massive, massive skater. Obviously not the quickest, but again, someone who plays with physicality, someone who will get in someone's face, someone who's probably not going to get that many people in his face just due to his size alone. He's an absolute unit. Not a groundbreaking trade, I think, by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's a nice sort of bottom six addition for Pittsburgh. I think a third round pick is about fair as well. Ryan Strome arrives in Calgary in exchange for a 2027 seventh round pick from Anaheim. Again, for me, this is a numbers and a salary game, kind of money in, money out. They bring on John Carlson. They need to shift some salary out, and they move Ryan Strome to the Calgary Flames, who obviously are in no salary cap issues at the moment. So he arrives there, 7th-round pick. Anaheim shift him off. Calgary take him on. We'll see sort of what happens there. The final kind of big move, I think, from the deadline day in itself, Brayden Schenn arrives in New York for the Islanders in exchange for Jonathan Drouin, Marcus Gidloff, a 2026 first-round pick, as well as a third-round pick as well. Brayden Schenn obviously has been a massive guy for the St. Louis Blues these last few years. Obviously wanting to go somewhere and play in a more competitive market. The Islanders looking like they're going to be pushing for the playoffs this year. I think that that's a great, a great acquisition for the Islanders. The Blues getting Jonathan Drouin, who I can't believe is 30 years old now, as well as a goaltender in Marcus Gidloff, who, again, if memory serves me correctly, he's another guy who's just absolutely huge. About a 6'7" goaltender, I think, as well as a first-round pick. That pick belonging to Colorado initially, so it will be a late 2026 first-round pick, probably in the back end of the first round, as well as a third-round pick as well. So the Islanders load up down the middle with Schenn. Obviously, they've got Horvat as well. Adding more of a veteran presence there as well. Scott Laughton goes to LA. Again, not really sure what the LA Kings are doing at this point, for a conditional third-round pick going back to Toronto. Now, this is a guy who a year ago, Toronto gave up a first-round pick to get Scott Laughton through the door. Now he's going a year later for a third-round pick. I don't understand the direction of either of these franchises, to be honest. I'm not sure what Toronto are doing. I'm not sure what LA are doing. It's beyond my comprehension, that's for sure. But he arrives in LA for their last throw of the dice to try and get into the playoffs. A few final moves to mention. The Washington Capitals obtained David Kampf from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for a 6th-round pick. Lucas Reichel, former Blackhawk, arrives in Boston. Traded from Vancouver to Boston, his third team of the season for a 2026 6th-round pick. Someone who I think will probably go down to the Providence Bruins in the AHL. Can't see any way where he's playing on Boston. I think that he'll probably find himself down in the AHL as they make their sort of Memorial Cup run. Timothy Liljegren also traded to the Washington Capitals in exchange for a 4th-round pick originally belonging to the Vegas Golden Knights. So a mid-round pick going to San Jose in exchange for Timothy Liljegren. I don't have too much to add in relation to that. He's a fine defenseman, probably a bottom pair guy, but the Caps, they needed someone to come in and serviceably replace John Carlson. I think Timothy Liljegren, obviously nowhere near the same quality, but he ends up in Washington for a 4th-round pick. The Flames and the Islanders exchange Brennan Othmann and Jacob Battaglia, the wingers swapping sides. Brennan Othmann, a really exciting young player for the Rangers. I'm not really sure why they were so keen to get rid, but Battaglia goes back the other way in a player-for-player swap there as well. One final trade to mention, the Chicago Blackhawks trading Aiden Thompson also to the New York Rangers in exchange for Derek Pouliot. Pouliot, 32-year-old defenseman, he will go and play for the Rockford Ice Hogs in the AHL. Aiden Thompson, I imagine, will go and play for the Kitchener Rangers in the AHL as well. Thompson, a guy log-jammed by the forward prospect pool in Chicago. A little bit roadblock there. And they needed some veteran defense help with the likes of Kevin Korchinski, Ethan Del Mastro, Sam Rinzel, Artem Levshinov, all playing in Chicago on a very, very young team there. They needed a solid, dependable AHL body to go back down there, and they get Derek Pouliot. So, a couple more trades to touch on then from the 5th of March, so the day before the deadline. David Perron goes to Detroit again in exchange for a conditional 2026 4th-round pick. Detroit will give Ottawa a 2026 fourth round pick, originally belonging to Columbus, if Perron plays a game in a game before the end of the season. If Detroit advances to the second round of the 2026 playoffs and Perron plays in 50% of the first round games, Detroit will give Ottawa a 2026 third round pick instead, and that's their own pick. So David Perron, again, another veteran in this league. He goes back to Detroit, again, a market he's incredibly familiar with. And he will add, again, more veteran presence to try and push Detroit into the postseason. He'll just slot right in there, I imagine. Very much a plug-and-play type guy. But Ottawa getting a mid-round pick in exchange for David Perron. The Ottawa Senators receive Warren Foegele and a conditional 2026 third-round pick in exchange for a 2026 second-round pick and a conditional 2026 third-round pick going the other way. So both teams swapping conditional 2026 third-round picks. I'm going to try and dissect that again from what Daily Faceoff is telling me. So the conditions is Ottawa will get the worst of the LA Kings' own 2026 third-round pick or Dallas's 2026 third-round pick. The LA Kings will get the better of Ottawa's own 2026 third-round pick or Washington's 2026 third-round pick. However, if both Ottawa and Washington do not qualify for the 2026 playoffs, Ottawa will instead transfer the LA Kings' worst of Ottawa's own 2026 or Washington's 2026 third-round pick. Try and unpick the shit out of that. Jesus Christ. Pointless conditions going right the way through there. I don't understand, but hey-ho. The Dallas Stars obtaining Michael Bunting from the Nashville Predators in exchange for a 2026 third-round pick, originally belonging to Seattle, so a mid-round pick. Goes for a guy in Michael Bunting who will definitely add some middle six scoring for the Dallas Stars, who have a phenomenally deep team going into the playoffs this year. I think that the depth that they have throughout their lineup, obviously Ranton and Robertson, Heiskanen, even Ottinger in goal, they've got such a good team top to bottom. And I don't know if I would favour them over the Avalanche at the moment, but I certainly think if the first round ends up being between Dallas and Minnesota, I think that's going to be an absolutely outstanding playoff round. I think that's going to be edge of the seat stuff. The Minnesota Wild obtaining Jeff Petrie, again, another aged veteran to go along with Nick Foligno, just to add a bit more grit and experience, playoff experience, in exchange for a conditional 2026 seventh round pick that becomes a fifth if Minnesota win 2 playoff rounds and Petrie plays in 50% or more of Minnesota's playoff games during those first 2 rounds. So, potential 7th round pick, potentially a 5th. To obtain Jeff Petrie, I think that's a solid deal for Minnesota to add a bit of veteran experience onto their back end. Obviously, they have Quinn Hughes, who's the bona fide superstar. They've got they've got Brock Faber as well and Jared Spurgeon, and they've already got a mix of youth and experience. But I think adding someone like Jeff Petrie, who's been around the block and been in his fair share of postseason games, I think is really exciting for Minnesota and a nice little piece to add there. The Colorado Avalanche also obtaining Nicholas Waugh from the Toronto Maple Leafs. They sell off another one of their pieces. The Colorado Avalanche giving up a conditional 2027 first-round pick and a conditional 2026 fifth-round pick, with the conditions being that if Colorado's 2027 first-round pick is in the top 10, Colorado will send an unprotected 2028 first-round pick to Toronto. And Toronto will receive the lowest of Colorado's 3 2026 fifth-round picks. So it's a top 10 protected first-round pick. I can't see any way that the Colorado Avalanche have that pick in the top 10, so I think they'll be pretty safe in that being a 2027 first-round pick if you're Toronto. It's I think that's... You've got to pay to get these guys in, and Nicholas Waugh arrives in Colorado. The Maple Leafs restocking more of their draft capital and their assets. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with this Toronto team, the direction they decide to go in, the direction they decide to move in, whether they stick, whether they fold, whether they decide to rebuild and sell off some of their big pieces or not. Yeah, I think Colorado, similarly to Minnesota, similarly to Dallas, they are all in. Um, the Vegas Golden Knights obtain center Nick Dowd from the Washington Capitals in exchange for goaltender Jesper Vikman, as well as a 2029 second round pick and a 2027 third round pick. So Washington again obtaining some more draft capital in exchange for a guy in Nick Dowd, who will add some middle sixth depth for the Vegas Golden Knights there. I think the Capitals are kind of out of the playoff picture. I think that's why they've moved on from Dowd and they've moved on from Carlson. I think they're looking to try and just reload some assets ahead of their potential rebuild, retool, whatever it may be when Ovechkin calls it a day. I think they're out of the playoff picture for now, though. A big deal. Well, I'm going to cover these both together. The Edmonton Oilers and the Chicago Blackhawks making two trades within a couple of days of each other. The Edmonton Oilers obtaining Jason Dickinson and Colton Dach in exchange for Andrew Mangiapane and a conditional 2027 first-round pick. So that first-round pick is top 12 projected. Again, similarly to the Colorado pick, I can't see any way that the Edmonton Oilers are one of the 12 worst teams in hockey in 2027. So I think that's fairly safe for Chicago that will be a 2027 first-round pick. They also get back Andrew Mangiapane, who a little bit of a cap dump for Edmonton, kind of a money in, money out situation. I think he's on about $3.6 million for this season and next. So, Chicago can absolutely take that on. It's going to help him hit the cap floor next year. Jason Dickinson, a guy who I've mentioned in previous shows, is someone who I thought was going to get traded from Chicago. Certainly seemed that way. He's a UFA at the end of the season. Chicago will be retaining 50%, so that's $2.125 million of his $4.25 million cap hit. If you're an Edmonton fan, what you are getting in Jason Dickinson is an elite defensive forward. He's a great 200-foot player. He's a previous 20-goal scorer in this league, but he has been a massive part of the Chicago Blackhawks penalty kill this year. It's the best penalty kill in the league, and Jason Dickinson's been a massive part of that. He's also a great locker room guy, great talker, very much speaks and says things how they are. So he doesn't kind of cryptically answer questions. He always just sort of, answers the question proposed to him. And he's a great guy to have in the locker room. They also obtained Colton Dach, which was a little bit of a surprise for me. He wasn't someone who I thought was probably going to get traded, but he's been a guy for Chicago this year who's been kind of buried in the bottom line. He's also been scratched sort of numerous times, and Colton Dach, similarly to his brother Kirby Dach, has had a lot of issues with his health and with his overall fitness. He's been injured a lot. Quite unfortunately on a lot of occasions as well, but he's also just had a problem with consistency, struggling often to remain sort of consistently engaged in games. His focus can drift. He's a really exciting prospect, and if Edmonton can get the best out of him, they'll have a great sort of bottom six power forward, someone who can lay the body. He leads rookies in hits in the NHL this year by a landslide. He's an absolute physical monster. He will lay a body, and if they have that in the playoffs, that could be a massive difference maker for them. He's also an Edmonton native, so good to get Colton Dach in for his hometown team. It is the rule of the NHL. You have to play for your hometown team at some point in your career. They also made another trade involving Connor Murphy, also going to Edmonton in exchange for a 2028 second round pick. So in total, the Oilers obtained Dickinson, Dach, and Murphy in exchange for Andrew Mangiapane, a 2027 first and a 2028 second. Now, as a Chicago fan, I'm incredibly happy about this. I think that's it's a great return for Chicago. Murphy was another guy who was always going to be on the move. He's never played in the playoffs in his career, and absolutely deserves the opportunity to. Murphy, similarly to Dickinson, was a massive part of that Chicago penalty kill this season. He's been absolutely terrific in that regard. Chicago will retain 50% of Murphy's 4.4 million salaries, so 2.2 million being obtained there. It does mean for Chicago that they have now traded both their captain and their 2 assistant captains, so we're going to have to wait and see how that leadership core shakes out for Chicago over the rest of the season. We've seen Bedard wearing the A, we've seen Bertuzzi wearing the A. The third A escapes me. Why the fuck is it escaping me now? Anyway, so they're definitely moving on into the next stage of the rebuild of Chicago, and this will very much be kind of Bedsy's team moving forward. So Edmonton get some premium shutdown guys, some great penalty killers, some physical guys, and Stan Bowman making deals with Chicago already in his short time there. Finally, one of the most NHL 26 franchise mode trades I've ever seen in all of my time watching hockey. The Utah Mammoth obtain Mackenzie Weegar from the Calgary Flames. The defenseman joins in exchange for Olli Mata, centerman Jonathan Castagna, as well as a 2026 second-round pick, a 2026 second-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. Yet, you heard that correctly, Calgary obtaining 3 2026 second-round picks, originally belonging to Utah, the New York Rangers, and the Ottawa Senators. So one of those, the Rangers' second-round pick will be a really high second-round pick and will be almost as good as a first at that point. But, Utah giving up all the picks and all the players in order to get Weegar in, who he joins a Utah team who is really showing intent. This year, since they've moved from Arizona, they've really decided that they're going to be competitive. They're going to try and do what they can to help these young forwards that they've got. They've got Gunther, they've got Keller, they've got Paterka. They traded for they've traded for Weegar now. They've got Sergachev as well. They traded for Sergachev, and they are now putting together a sneaky solid roster that I think could be capable of causing some upsets. But I like Weegar, obviously a right shot defenseman, a great two-way guy. He's not the biggest, but certainly excels in the physical aspects of the game. I think for sure he's more than capable of laying the body, but he can also go out there and generate offense as well for Utah, which they'll absolutely be hoping for. I think he'll be on the power play as well. He's good at managing the puck, great at distributing the puck as well. But yeah, that was just an absolutely crazy trade. And I think pretty much that wraps everything up. There's a few sort of minor league trades that I'm not really going to kind of break down. I've been at this for 40 minutes now talking to myself. So I think I'm going to wrap things up there. But Nathaniel will be back in the next episode to break down more NHL action with me. As always, guys, you can find us on both X and Instagram at the PBP Podcast. You can also find us on TikTok at the Penalty Box Perspective. You can also find this show in video format on YouTube at the Penalty Box Perspective. Please go like and subscribe there where you can, and please consider giving us a 5-star review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It really, really helps me, Nathaniel. We're making some great changes to the show. Obviously, we're now in video format. We've got some more graphics. We've got Nathaniel's fucking soundboard. We've got all of that. He's going to hate me for that. But thanks, as always, guys, for being with me as I break down the wildness of the trade deadline, all the players, all the picks, all the trades, all the teams. Join us again on the next one. Thanks, as always, guys, for being with us.